Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Finding the Alternative. I'm your host, Adam. And in today's episode, we're doing an interview with Jason. And I will turn the time over to him and let him introduce himself, and then we will get into it. So, Jason.
Amen. Thank you, Adam, and thank you for this opportunity and giving me a platform to share. It's really awesome, and I thank you. Um, so, guys, my name is Jason. Um, I am a father and husband. I live out here in New Jersey. Um, I've been a Christian since 2012. I I began to realize that where I was at and what I was doing was wrong, and um, I considered to read the Bible, and I wanted to know who God was. So uh, it was around that time that I was going through a lot around that time, um, and well, nevertheless, I I've been a Christian since the latter parts of 2012, and I still am a Christian. Um, I've been through a lot, and I still believe in God, and I still trust God. And one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to come here and share is that um, you can still trust God even though. Um, you have gone through some circumstances, people have lied to you, like the World Mission Society. Um, God's word is true, and you can abide in it, and it'll lead you and guide you onto life, onto to Jesus Christ. So um, that was the biggest thing that I wanted to convey to everybody to keep trusting God. Um, so if I can just backtrack a little bit from 2012. Um, my mother passed. Around that time, I was heavily indoctrinated in the New Age, even prior to her passing. And you know, we, me getting out of that is because of the fault. There was false prophecies of 2012 that stuff was going to happen then, and it didn't come to pass. So me and my wife kind of we just got out of that. We were deeply into it. We were doing meditations. Um, I was a Reiki practitioner. Um, I learned how to do Reiki, and I was
Can you
practicing
explain a
it.
little bit what that is,
Oh,
just for the viewers?
so yeah. So this was a funny. I think this was invented by maybe like I think a Japanese medicine man,
Okay.
and he figured out a way on how to heal people through um, uh, some form of spirituality. You are supposed to call on spiritual guides to guide you into the different places that need to be healed in the body. And with that, there comes some, if you're Christian, there are very weird rituals that you have to do, and you have to invite the spirits in to lead and guide you. When I
Mm.
was doing that, and um, I was hearing, well, these random thoughts would come into my mind, and I would share it with people, and it was things pertaining to them. So I would, and in my amazement, I continued into it. I continued in it, and when I my initial purpose of getting into the Reiki um, was to heal my mother. My mother had cancer.
Mm.
Again, I was looking at alternatives to than the chemotherapy. And around that time, I was a big conspiracy theorist. I didn't trust anything of the government, nor did I trust, the medical system. So I was just like, look, I
Right.
have to heal. I have to heal her in another way, despite nobody agreed with me. But I was in that place. Um,
You're doing it for your
and
mom.
Yeah, yeah. Initially, I was doing that for my mom. Initially, I had seen it, and I was pondering the idea of doing it. But when she got sick, I just went full force into it, and I did my training. And there was some things that were concerning to me when I was in there. Um, it even though I was there, it might have been the Holy Spirit, telling me like, "Hey, you don't belong here." But there was some uncomfortable things that were happening there that my inside of me was like, "Hey, you need to get out of this," but the outside of me was like, "No, it's okay, it's
Mm,
okay." Um, and you know, when you're getting indoctrinated, you had to like put your hand like this, and you were supposed to. They gave the symbol. It's like that Peru symbol.
okay.
It starts in the center and then it just circles out to make the letter P, right? It's the same thing. It was like you had before every session, before you were to get into this spiritual place, you would have to draw this symbol on your hands. And I remember when I was drawing it, I felt like I was writing 666 on my hands, right? I was just like, man, that was my initial thought. I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm writing 666 on my hand.
Interesting.
Um, and um, that made me feel uncomfortable. And then, yeah, when the lady did my reading, or where she was, you lay down and she waves your hands, and then they begin to focus in the area, and they're like, yeah, I'm healing this area. But after we were done, she began to say things about me, and I was just, very personal things, and I was really embarrassed, and I felt so uncomfortable with it. Um, and then as she was actually making us official members, she was speaking some sort of language. I don't know what she was speaking, and then she was making as if she was spitting on us. She wasn't really spitting on us, but she was going
Mhm.
pit pit pit, right? And I remember when she was doing that, I did see um how they do witchcraft in Puerto Rico. I was watching some documentary, and I remember when they were indoctrinating people into that religion, they would take chicken's blood, put it in their mouth. They would put it in a bottle, put it in their mouth, and then they would spit it on you. When she was doing that, I wasn't thinking this. I was like, "What is this witchcraft?" Like there was some like red flags, but I still went along with it, right?
Right.
I started to practice it, and yeah, I was getting information from people. It was just coming to mind, and then I would just share with them, and yeah, people were shocked. I was shocked, but
And what was the name of this? Was there like a specific church or was there a specific name or
um, no, this is part of that new age stuff. And it
just
wasn't
like
a
that
church.
spirituality guru
Yes.
meditating, inviting spirits, manifesting that kind of stuff?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. That's what I
Okay.
was involved with. That's exactly what I was involved with. Um, and so and the lady was, another thing that bothered me, and the lady was just like, "Hey, whoever you practice on, make sure you charge them." And to me at that time, and I want to get somewhere with that, but at that time, I'm like, well, why would I, if I'm trying to help people, why am I going to charge them? Like that just
Right.
bothered me because she was very strong. She was like, you charge them, make sure you charge them. And I'm just like, man, I don't want to charge anybody if I'm going to help them. I don't want to do that. Um, so I did it on my wife. I did it on her family members. I did it on my mother. And, every time I did it, there was always this fear. There was always this anxiety. I didn't understand why. Like something in my gut was telling me that it wasn't right, but I just continued. I didn't listen to that voice inside. I was like, no, it's okay. Um, so fast forward. My mother's doing chemo. I'm doing the Reiki. She says she's feeling better, but she's outwardly. I'm looking at her. She's not better at all.
Right.
um and then she passed away. And
I'm sorry about that.
yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. um around that time, things began to change. I was constantly searching after the truth, and I came across this documentary, um, which was called uh, "The Age of Aquarius, the Age of Evil." Right. Well, that part was left off of it. It said the Age of Aquarius. Now, if anyone is in New Age, that's what we're waiting for, right? The Age of Aquarius, right?
Mm.
And um, when I came across this documentary, um, it was a Christian apologetic against this other documentary called Zeitgeist, which was, I mean, people were coming into the new age by the troves with this documentary, Zeitgeist.
Yeah, I've seen
And
that one.
you've seen it, okay?
I've
Well,
seen
that's
Zeitgeist.
you seen it, right? I was introduced to New Age, and then I saw Zeitgeist, and that just like put the clad down. And in that, it totally preaches against Jesus, right?
Oh, for sure.
It inscribes Jesus as all these
A
other false.
copycat. Yeah, like he's a
Yes,
copycat of all these other pagan gods and stuff, which they don't base out of actual fact. It's more like they're trying to be the truth about Jesus, but all their facts and evidences are nonsense when you actually look into
yes,
it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It is complete nonsense. But me being gullible, me never reading the Bible, me never having a relationship with God, I went right into it. And watching that movie just really solidified it for me, which kind of birthed everything, to be honest with you. But this was an apologetic. So the name of the documentary um, is Age of Aquarius, the Age of Evil, right? So I watched it, and it really troubled me. It really troubled me. And they go right into that apologetic, with ascribing Jesus to all these other deities or false gods or other people throughout history. Like they broke it all down, and I was just like, whoa, like. But part of me was so attached to the New Age, I didn't want to believe it, but it struck me. It struck me. It really
Yeah.
hit me. It had an effect on me. I was just like, well, wait a second. Like, is all what I'm doing a lie? Is this a lie? So I began to do my own research. Um, and then I came across another documentary, um, The Age of Deceit, um, by a YouTuber called Face Like the Sun. His name is Gons Shimura. He just got his channel back. They had flagged his channel and they took it away. He just got it back. Um, and when I seen that, it was again, it's another apologetic against the New Age, and it really dug into the roots, of you know who birthed all this. They brought up names and writings of Helena Blavatsky, and Alice Bailey, and I was just totally crushed at that moment. I was just like, man, this is. I really got to
Not
look
what you
into this.
thought.
Yeah, yeah. So once I really dug in and looked into the practices that I was practicing on a daily basis, I had crystals, I was meditating, I was doing all these little weird rituals. I had a pendulum and I was asking it questions. It would move and answer my questions. I was doing all this stuff, right? And when I started looking at the practices, it went from New Age, and then I saw the same practices being done in the Wiccan religion. And I remember seeing that. I was just like, well, wait a second. I don't consider myself to be a witch or a warlock. And as I kept digging, it led me right into Satanism. Like
Mm.
Satanism, Wiccanism, and New Age, they all have the same practices. All of
They're
them
all the
straight
same
across.
root.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I remember once I found that out, I felt like as if somebody punched me in my stomach. Literally, like my stomach began to hurt, and the words uttered out of my mouth again. I had no inclination of who the devil was. Like I never, I didn't even think there was a devil, right? But the words came out, and I was like, Satan, you have deceived me. Like I've been deceived by Satan, right? And I never used those words before. Um, and I yeah, I was determined at that point to know the truth, right? As
Hmm.
as we discussed before.
Yeah.
So I remember literally at the moment I had a Bible, never read it, never read it. I picked it up. I was like, God, if you're in here, I want to know who you are. And from that point on, and this was a little bit after maybe a month or if not 2 or 3 weeks after she passed away. Um, the Reiki never worked, right? And
Was that a sign that maybe was that another thing that woke you up? Was this potential healing power didn't work? Was that one thing that maybe made you think a little bit?
yeah, I mean, the thing that kept me latched onto is when I was getting information from people that I didn't know prior.
Mm.
I was kind of latched onto that, and and I'll get into later. Basically what I'm doing now is counteracting that right now with other people. Um, but yes, she didn't get healed, even though she said she was feeling stuff. Other people, when I would practice that on, they said that they will feel stuff. They were feeling things, right? And I was feeling things. I was feeling drawn to certain areas of their body while I was practicing that, and then that's when I would start hearing things. I was just like, man, like what's,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. Um,
So now you're looking at the Bible and you're trying to find God in the pages.
yes, yeah. So my grandmother was a Christian. Uh, the whole her, not her whole life, but from since what I can remember as a young child, she was a Christian. Sometime in my infancy, she became a Christian. She had a dramatic experience with the Lord and completely changed her. And she went full force. And same thing with my two uncles. They had a dramatic experience and they went hardcore into it. They ended up in a Spanish Pentecostal church. And if there's any Hispanics listening, you'll know what I'm talking
They
about.
know. They know what's up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so um, as a young child, my grandmother used to bring me. I used to see some weird stuff, and I was like, and I was like, what is going on here? Like, I don't understand it. But our Hispanic Pentecostals they will understand what I'm talking about. Um, but I'm reading the Bible. I'm reading my grandma. I go to my grandmother. I'm like, Grandma, I'm sorry. You were right. Because she was always trying to preach to me, and it was
Hmm.
in one ear and out the other. And I go to her. I'm like, look, Grandma, I'm sorry. You were right this whole time. Like, I know this is the truth, but I don't know where to start. How do I read this? Because when I would just open it, I'll be like, what the heck's going on here? And
Yeah, where do you start?
honestly, I was not big on reading either. Very rarely, even through grammar school, I always skim through reading. I would never really sit there and read a whole book. I think
Right.
prior to reading the Bible, I don't think I ever read a book no more than 50 pages. Um,
I'm
I was
similar.
just,
I don't like to read very much.
yeah, I was not big on reading at all. And so me trying to sit there and read, I was just like, I can't do this. This is tough. Um, and whatever I was able to read, I was completely confused, right? Because I had a lot of what we learned in school in my head. I had a lot of what other people said in my head. So me reading that, it was just like how can this be true? Like I was, part of me was just trying to reconcile what I was reading, right?
Hmm.
And I wanted to understand how people were reading it and understanding it and getting this knowledge because I would see preachers preaching the word and I'm like, man, that makes sense. That makes sense. How come when I read this, it's not making sense to me? I was like so lost with this. So I go to her, I apologize to her and I'm like, hey, I see this as the truth. And she was like, hey, start from the beginning. She was like, just start from the beginning and then read all the way through. And I was like, okay, all right. But when I was reading the Old Testament, I was just completely lost. completely lost. Then when I would go back to the Gospels. I started reading the Gospels, and I was just like, okay, I kind of understand this. I kind of, because Jesus was kind of really getting to the matters of the heart, and he was exposing people's hearts too. So I was just like, okay, I get this.
Yeah.
And then that's when I was starting to get convicted. I started to feel like, because I was at that point, I was a raging alcoholic, a liar, a thief. I mean, you could throw the whole book at me. I was guilty of it all, right? And I began to realize these things like, hey, this is not right. My whole life I thought it was okay, but
Yeah.
if you can get away with it, it's okay, right? That was my thought process.
Hmm.
Um, and I began to see that I was wrong in many areas in my life. And, I would pray to God. I'm like, God, I'm sorry for this and that. This is wrong. That is wrong. Um, you know, in in the midst of that, well, this is leading up to when I uh, got into um, world mission. Um, I'm studying. I'm looking at all these conspiracy theories too, and it was unhealthy. Um, my mind state. I was seeking truth, but at the same time, I was being such a hypocrite. At the same time, I
Hmm.
was latching on to a lot of people that that was still leading people astray, and me too. And um, around this time, I was married in 2010. Um, and I was married already, and me and my wife we're just working. I'm trying to learn the truth. We got out the new age. She was totally upset about what happened with the new age stuff. She wanted nothing to do with any type of religion after that. She was like, I'm not joining it. And she was like, I'm not joining anything. After this, I'm not. No,
I'm
this is all a
done.
lie. Yeah,
Yeah.
me, I was still seeking the truth. So it's I go through the rest of 2012. And 2013 is when, I was introduced to, WMSCOG. So the other Jason, he came in. I was a manager at a popular gift store called Brookstone. I don't think they're in business anymore. And when I got there, I worked really hard, and my store manager recommended me for a new store. I got it. I was elated, happy. I felt like, at that time God was, blessing me.
Blessing you. Yeah.
Yeah. And, um, I'm still trying to study the Bible, still living pretty wildly. I'm praying to God. I'm like, God, I need help with the Bible. There's things in here that I just don't understand. And then that's when Jason came in. I began to actually preach to him. And, he was a member of Whimsgog. And I think it was in Hackensack. There was a major location in Edgewater, um, and I think they were just I guess part of the members there broke off into this. Maybe they were getting too big, so they broke off into to to the location in Hackensack. So I was speaking to Jason. I was telling him, everything that I knew. I was just spilling my heart to him, and I was just trying to warn him, like, yo, there's darkness out here, and like you gotta be careful. Like all this stuff is a lie, and I'm blurting out every conspiracy theory that I can come with, and I'm trying to sprinkle in the word of the truth in there, and you know, and and I was excited because he was just like, yeah, I know, and when we had this conversation. At the end of us talking, after I did this demo with him on the massage chair, he gave me his card and he was like, "Look, call me." And I afterwards, I was like, God answered my prayer, and I went running after. I went running after this. So I called him, and he was just like, "Well, why don't you come down to the church, right?" So I came, and we I want to say something because I think this is really crucial. So I don't know if this is in all the W the World Mission, but they will have a study area, and it will kind of isolate you from anything else that's going on. I don't know if that's the same. They had these boards, and they would make it into like a little box, right? They had a lot of these boards. I think like 7 or 8 of them that they were right. When they would do teachings, they were right on the board, right? Um, and they had a lot of them. I was like, whoa, this is cool. They got a like, and I'm thinking so. I'm like, what? Like, what's going on here? But they closed it off, right? They closed it off, and
Yeah.
it's just you and the teacher, and um. I think the first teaching I did, and the teachings are very vague with me right now, so please forgive me. But I think the first teaching they did was um, as above, so below, like the sense that, we have a father and a mother, right? And, the same should be in heaven, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know what the name of that teaching was. I want to say it was above and below, something like that, but
It's called Heavenly Family, Earthly Family.
God. Okay. Okay. So I think that was the first thing that they taught me, right? And I was completely blown away. I have this conspiracy theory mindset now, right? Like, oh man, they they left this out too. They're hiding this too, right? So in my mind, I was there with my Bible. They were telling me the verses. I would go there. I'm reading. I'm like, oh man, this is. I'm like,
This is
wow.
unbelievable.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
then when they pulled out the book the same day, they pulled out the book of truth. Right? I think that's what they call it, right? Is it the book of truth?
Yeah, they call them Book of Truth, Truth Books, the Green Book, World,
Yeah.
the Mystery God, Spring Water of Life. Yeah,
Yeah, they pulled it out and they started showing me all this, like basically what happened in church history and how there's lies and this and that they have the truth and that and at this point they didn't say anything about Aung San Hong. I had no, and actually they kept that name for me for a while. The same thing with mother, like they kept that away from me for a while, right? It was, and I would question. I'm like, yo, just kind of speeding up. I would question who's on Sung Hong or who,
because you're
or
going to service and stuff, and they were saying his name, they were singing his name, they were singing to this New Jerusalem, this mother character, and you're just
yeah,
like, am I missing
yeah, they were.
something?
Yeah, they were holding. They were like, "Hey, we're gonna tell you. We're gonna tell you." So I assumed that all the pictures I saw with this lady all over all over the church, right? Because it was literally like on every single wall. I'm like, who is this lady? So I'm thinking she's maybe some type of founder or leader, right? Just based on what I've seen in the Christian church, I'm like, oh, maybe she's some type of leader, um, or founder, or I don't know, I don't know. And then with the name on Sung Hong, I thought it was being that the pastor was Korean. I thought that's how they say Jesus in Korean. That was my assumption because they didn't tell me. They wouldn't want to tell me. I'm like, oh, they're like, just trust us. We're gonna tell you. Just trust us, right? So, and I don't know if
All
they
will be
wanted.
revealed later.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't, thinking back on it, I don't know if they were thinking like, hey, this guy is. If we be straight up with him, he's just gonna leave. I don't know. That I was only assuming that. I was only assuming that.
Right.
So they do the teaching, just to get back to where we were. They do the teaching. I'm totally blown away. They show me the book. I'm blown away. I'm like, this is right down my alley because I want to sniff out lies wherever there is, and this looks like lies. And again, I'm in my infancy of my Christian walk. I don't know nothing really, only than what the words of Jesus saying about like how I need to change my heart. I don't know anything. Um, and I immediately they're like, "Hey, do you want to get baptized?" I'm like, "Yes, baptize me." And and then that was the first time I heard the name On Sung Hong. When they said, in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, in the name of Aung San Hong, and they they splashed some water on me in this in the bathroom, which had a shot like a shower, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and they just poured the water on me, right? So I did it. I felt incredible. I was excited. I'm like, man, things are going for me. I have my new job and I'm doing great there, and now I have the truth, and they're gonna teach me the truth. Like, I was on top of the world at that moment. Another thing that stuck out to me is that they were open every day. I can just stop in whenever I wanted to and just study. From that point on, I was there like almost every day studying. Um, and they would take me out from time to time and show me how to do ministry work. They definitely thought I was not prepared for it, but just to observe, and that's what I did from time to time. In the midst of all that, my wife is pregnant now. And I had a prior to that, I had a spiritual experience. Um, Man, I would like to share it if I can. So
Go for it.
in the midst of all that, me and my wife are trying to have a baby, and wasn't happening at all. And we I have a good friend that I was enlisted in the Navy. Um, I have a good friend. He lives out in North Carolina, so I would visit him from time to time. And this time, me and my wife went and visited him, and he had just had a baby. And um, I held her, and it was just like the most incredible feeling. I was and became very jealous. I began to ask God, like, why I don't have any children. Like, we've been trying and it's not happening. And I remember it really drove me to my knees. I was crying about it one day, and I got on my knees. I'm like, God, why? Like, I want a child. I want a child. And I remember in that moment, I felt like well, he brought a memory to me. When I was younger, maybe 18, 19, uh, I was working for a company, and we were all in the back, and this young lady she was having trouble with the father of her child, and they were split up. They were constantly fighting, and we were witnessing this, from her end, obviously. um, she would just be in the back crying, crying about it. And we were just like, man, if this is what family life is going to be like, we don't want any part of it, right? And I remember me saying out of my mouth, I was just like, hey, what? I don't want children. If it's going to be like this, I do not want children. This world is evil. What's the sense of having children if I'm going to suffer like that, or my children going to suffer like that? What's the point? And I remember I said that, right? And this is 18, 19 years old. I'm 46 now. At that time, I was 36. 36. At that time, I was 36. And I you know, this is decades past me saying that I've long forgot about I even said anything like that. But he brought that memory back to me. Like, and I relived it in that moment. And I'm just like, whoa. And I remember, like, telling God, I'm like, God, I'm sorry. Like, I don't even remember me saying that. Lord, if I can take it back, please, I want to take it back. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And like 3 weeks later, my wife was pregnant, and I never
That's
told her.
crazy.
Yeah, I never
That
told
is
her about that.
crazy.
But when she told me that she was pregnant, I was just totally blown away. I was just like, what? And then that's when I told her like what happened. Um, and yeah, that was just an incredible moment. Like, God was really showing me, like, hey, I'm here, and I'm real. And
And I'm listening.
yeah, yeah, and again, this is all around the time that I'm seeking Him. Like, I'm hungry to know Him, right? I'm hungry to know Him. And that happens, um, and then my wife's pregnant, so I'm going there. She's pregnant. She wanted nothing to do with it, because of the experience that we had with the New Age. She
The
was like, "No, I
church,
don't."
right? Not the
Yeah,
baby. The church.
Yeah, yeah, it's the church, not the baby. Yeah, I apologize. She wanted nothing to do with the church, and I remember one time I brought her unannounced, right? Because I knew somebody was going to be there. There was somebody there all the time, right? So I,
For
I went
sure.
there. I went there unannounced, and it just so happened there was some brothers and sisters outside, and my friend Jason, who was my caretaker at that
Yeah.
time,
Who
right?
brought you
He,
in, basically?
yeah, yeah, and I forgot what's that called?
Branch.
A branch. Okay, but he was like my caretaker. So I brought, and he just so happened to be there um, at the front doors because it was, you would go in and then there was an elevator. We were on like the second floor of that building. Underneath there was like a seafood restaurant, and then that building was like it was on a, it was like right off, like the river was right there. Um, there was a body of water there that went into a bigger body of water, but it was right there on the base. So there was a seafood restaurant um, in the same building, and that was on the first floor, and then the church was on the second floor. Um, so yeah, I get there, I bring her, and I'm like, oh, I park my car right in the front. We both get out, and the love bombing that he was giving her, like that always stood out to me, and I didn't realize that they were doing the same thing to me when I first got there. It was just like, oh, hey, God bless you, hey, hey, like everybody was just super nice, and that was like one of the things that really stood out to me. But I brought her there, and she was, um, she was like, yeah, they were nice, right? I mean, we eventually leave. I was like, hey, you want to stay? Let's just stay. She's like, no, no, let's go home. And we go off and drive home, and she was like, yeah, they're nice, but something doesn't feel right. I don't like it, and I don't want to be involved with any of this. Like, she's like, I don't like this. She's like, look, if you want to do it, fine, but I don't want to be involved with this whatsoever.
Right.
Um, so I'm still going. Every Saturday, I mean, they made a emphasis to keep the Sabbath, right? And I was there most Saturdays. I was there. Most Saturdays I was there. I made the schedule, so I made it where I didn't work Saturdays anymore. Um, I didn't do any more Saturdays. I would just work every Sunday. And so I was there. I would get there a little late every time. Um, I think at this point, uh, yeah, I would just always got there late. I always got there right when they were singing some hymns. I would just get there. I would just get there right when they were like in the midst of one thing, and I would get ridiculed a lot for it to go there, to get there on time, but I wouldn't. I would get ridiculed even in my attire because I never liked wearing suits, and my heart was bent on not wearing suits, but they would get on me like a lot about it, and that bothered me. I was like, man, why are you bothering me about this? And this is my attire shouldn't matter. Um, and um, they were constantly. I was constantly forgetting the lessons. They would. This was another thing that really stuck out to me. Whenever whenever there was breaks in between the preaching, because I think we would do praising. um there'll be a little bit of prayer, then they would get into the word, and then we would break for like, we would go out, do ministry work, come back, eat, um and then I think they would do another sermon that would just expand the whole day. And actually,
Yep.
yeah, they would have lunch, and then we would go out. And I don't remember if we would have a meal afterwards. I don't remember. But I remember just loving every bit of it, man. I remember just
Yeah.
loving every bit of it. Again, I lost I lost my mother. They're being super nice. I mean, even though I was getting some rebukes here and there about, my clothing, me not getting there on time. Um, I was they I guess the point where I was at, they were still kind of they were, because some of the testimonies I hear, it's like how they were just really pressing people. I mean, even to the point where it's like abuse, verbally, just the constant verbal abuse,
Yeah.
and the constant pressure. I was feeling that pressure, but I always kind of, I don't know, I kept a bit of an arm's length because that right there, it kind of bothered me. Like, why are you trying to force me to do these things? And that was just one of the things that kind of bothered me. It's just I'm forcing you to do this, you have to do this,
Right.
and then, preaching fear and like, hey, you think, mother or father were like this, and um,
Yeah, the
you know,
constant like the end is coming, father's coming, anytime father's coming. What are you doing? Don't rest, don't. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was starting to get on that, and Jason, I was working from Sunday through Friday, and he pretty much had the same schedule, so he was always visiting my job. He was always preaching to me. You know, uh, in the midst of that, I'm going maybe 3 or 4 times a week, um, including the Sabbath, to get teachings. Every Sabbath day they would try to go over some of the teachings with me. And I remember if I would get one answer wrong, they were like, we got to do the teaching again. And then if it was on a Sabbath day, we would go into the bathroom and they would isolate me in the bathroom. Um,
Jeez.
well, in that area where they would baptize you. Um,
Oh,
it was just a shower in there, I think, but it was in there. And then they would do the teaching in there. And what annoyed me is like, hey, I want to write notes. They wouldn't let me take any notes. They're like, no, you can't take notes. And that was another thing that just stood out to me. I'm like, well, why can't I write notes?
this is the
And
truth. Why?
yeah, they
Yeah.
wouldn't allow me to write. I don't know if that's something you experienced or others, but they were like, no.
Sometimes.
Yeah, they were like, no, you have to just listen. You just
Y-
listen.
Yeah,
And
some with like the basic subjects they would let us write or take notes or something, but if it was like more of the controversial subjects, they would be like they would collect our phones, they would say no notes, they would yeah.
oh wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, so I wasn't alone on that. Because I
Definitely
never
not.
the testimonies I've heard, I never hear anybody mention that. That was just one thing that stuck out to me. Because for me to learn, I have to write stuff. It's just something that
Same.
helps me. I have to write it out, and it sticks
Same.
with me if I write it out. And them telling me not to do that, that was just like, come on, man. Like, and it just always bothered me. That's something that always bothered me. So I'm going 3 or 4 times a day, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around. Some things are coming to mind as I'm speaking, but um, around that time after I bring my wife is when they revealed to me. They were just like, "Oh, is he ready?" And I'm just like, "For ready for what?" And then that's when they showed me this video about mother, right? And I remember watching it, and well, they showed me that video how we sinned. It was the video of how we sinned,
Then
right?
heaven boy.
That we were all angels, and that we sinned, and that we got banished to earth, because we ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, and
Um,
sided with Satan and all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and I remember watching that, and I was having that feeling as I was telling you with the Reiki. My insides was like, no, you need to. My insides were telling me to leave. They're like, hey, you need to leave now. You need to leave now. And I think they waited to tell me this because I don't know if they saw that in me. Um, but uh, when they did finally reveal it to me, like my inside was like, yo, this is not right. Like, you need to go.
Do you think they were indoctrinating you in order for you to be able to receive it better?
I absolutely think so. I think they were breaking me down mentally, particularly with I felt like the broken wheel in a sense, because it was me that they were constantly bringing into that room and isolating me and doing the teachings with. I didn't see
Hmm.
that with anybody else. I was not seeing that. It was just me. They're like, "Oh, you don't know it? We got to do it again." I remember I did one of the studies like 3 or 4 times. One study,
Mm.
they made me do it like 3 or 4 times, and I was really mad and upset, and not so much at them, but me. I was just like, "Man, how can I not know this? I should know this already." And um, they were breaking me down to receive whatever they were willing to teach because they were like constantly telling me that I was wrong about something, and they were like, "Hey, this is wrong. We got to teach it to you again." And I would just be discouraging myself that I didn't remember, right?
Right.
So it made me more attentive. I'm like, okay, I gotta listen. I gotta be more attentive. I gotta listen. This is the truth. I'm gonna go to hell. And yeah, they were preaching a lot of, hell, right? And
Yeah.
um, and that the times are close and that you're gonna go to hell. And they were preaching that a lot. I mean, almost every sermon, right? And
Yeah.
um on how and that we need to bear fruit, right? And like that was just such a huge emphasis. Like it was like, you know, it it was trying to, it put that sense of urgency in me, like, hey, I gotta do better, man. Like I'm screwing up. Like I gotta stop. I gotta stop sinning. I gotta stop this and that. I'm gonna go to hell. Like my thoughts was like, I'm gonna die. That was like my thought
Yeah.
process at that time. It's like
It was fight or flight response.
yeah, yeah. So when they showed me that video, they already have broken me down, but inside of me, I was like, hey, man, you need to go. You need to get out of here because this ain't right. All right. Like that was going on the inside of me. And I remember going home and part of me was just like, man, like I was like, man, where did this come from? Where did this come from? But then at the same time, I wouldn't question them. I didn't question them because every time I had a question, it was just there was always an answer, right? And then if there wasn't an answer, it was just, we'll talk about it later, but it was just, it was negative sometimes, it was just, um, I just felt, it was just some negative emotions towards me when I would ask certain questions.
Like,
Um,
how dare
I-
you ask us? We're here to save you. How dare you ask us?
yeah, yeah, man. Like, there was this one guy and he would admit it that he was, arrogant, right? And he was very studied in the doctrine. I don't want to say the word, I want to say the doctrine. He was very studied in the doctrine, and they had told me to go to him if I had any questions. So if there was a Korean pastor and his wife, Korean wife, and then the second pastor in charge, he was Hispanic, and then behind him was another co-pastor. um he was Hispanic too. And in the area where I live, and in that area was a lot of Hispanic. So majority of the church there was Hispanic. Um, it was majority all young people. That was one thing I remember. There was one elderly lady, and um, I felt like they were trying to get rid of her. Like that's what I felt like. That's what it seemed like every when we would have fellowship, like nobody was really around her.
Mm.
That's one thing I noticed. I don't know I never even spoke to her. I remember Jason told me just to stay away from her, that she has a lot of problems. And I was just like, okay.
Hmm.
But there was one older lady that was going there. I don't know if if there was a family member going there, or I don't know how she got there. Then eventually she just stopped coming. She just was not there anymore. And again, when I asked what happened to her, they were just like, hey, she has like too many issues, and she doesn't want to be here any longer. But my thinking back on it, they were probably reprimanding her so much, and she ended up leaving. Or I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to assume, but
But then they
um,
paint her, regardless of what happened, it was not her. It was most likely something that had to do with the church. But of course, they have to paint it a certain way because they can't admit it's the doctrine, it's how we treated her, it's the church. They can't, so it's her problem that she left. Same with me,
Yeah.
same with everybody else. It's always we're the problem. We're not getting lied to. We're not the church isn't wrong. The truth isn't wrong. We're the problem. It's like, yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, and when I would see somebody, I guess whoever her caretaker was, um, I would always see her in a place of despair. Like her face always looked like there was something, like she was going through some type of trouble. And I think that's what the primary reason she was there, that she was going through some type of struggle. Um, but I never found out what that was because they were just like, hey, stay away from her. Like
yeah.
she, like basically, hey, she's trouble, stay away from her. And I didn't get that, um, I didn't get that part. And yeah, and I want to say something too on like the false humility. Um, they show these they would show me all the, particularly that group, like some of the stuff that they did, like they were doing blood drives. Um, you know, there was like a hurricane that hit us, and they were out there cleaning in the neighborhood. Um, and they like really put that up, like, hey, we're doing our good works. We're doing this, we're doing that to help people, and that was something that drew me in too. When they showed that, they were showing these newspaper articles, and they were showing pictures of them, like they have all this garbage and all this trash, and that was something I was like, man, now I would love to be involved with something like that. That was one of the things that really sparked my interest when they preached to me. Not so long after, they showed me, like, they're like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the stuff that we
Mhm.
do. We help communities. And Jason said that they would go out and feed people, but I never see them do that. I never seen them do that at all, actually. Any of them, they said that they were doing that stuff, but I saw nobody doing that stuff. And then when we would go out to minister, it was we were- it was always after younger people. It was never, you know, because I would see some people. I'm like, hey, let's go talk to them. They're like, nah, nah, we can't go talk to them. And I'm like, why? And then again, it was just I wouldn't get any answers. I wouldn't I wouldn't get the answer. They're like, we'll tell you later. I'm just like, well, okay. Um, so all right, so I'm still going to the church. I'm going and getting there slightly late every Sabbath. I'm getting reprimanded. I remember one Sabbath, um, man. So one Sabbath, there was a guy gets a phone call. Um, one of the brothers gets a phone call, and it's his family. His family, their house is literally burning down. There was a fire in their house, and it
Jeez.
was and it was burning down, right? And the family called for him to come, just to be there, and um and I didn't know this at the moment. I see all this like commotion and talking amongst him and some, the pastor and some of the other stronger brothers. And
Hmm.
um I don't know what you call them, the evangelizers or gospel workers. I don't
Probably
remember.
like unit leaders, group leaders, deacons.
Ye- yes, yes,
Yeah.
okay, there we go. And they're talking to him, right? And um he's there, and they make this announcement. They're like, hey, brother so and so, um his we just got news that his family's house is on fire. And they called him to come, and he decided to stay here with us. He's decided to keep the Sabbath. And then they were like, we want to use him as an example of how we should be. And then he gets up and he says, that he's like, yeah, my family called me, my mother was crying, and I decided that I need to keep the Sabbath, and I need to stay here, right? And I remember when I was like, everybody's like, oh wow, and everybody's clapping and everybody's like lifting him up, and I'm just like sitting there like, whoa, like
Something's
I,
wrong. Something is wrong.
yeah, yeah, I struggle with that. I struggled with that, and and then again, it's just that that introduction, just not breaking God's law, not breaking God's law, so we can go back to father and mother, right? That we're not going to go back into the it became a word, and that always stood out to me. That always stood out to me. I thought it was wrong, right? um at first, but then I was convinced, like, man, maybe I need to just like neglect everything and
And
neglect my
everyone.
yeah, yeah, and that really kind of set the tone. I remember after that, I was doing that for a little bit. My wife's pregnant, and um she wanted me there at times, and then even when my son was born, um he's born in 2014, um of June, yeah, June 2014. I was still there. I was out there from the beginning of 2013 to almost near the end of 2014. Um, and my son was born, and yeah, Saturdays were hard. I wouldn't stay the whole day. I wouldn't stay the whole day. At that point, I cut off staying there the whole day. At that point, when my son was born, I would go there for the first service. We would fellowship. Maybe I will go do, when I would go and minister, I wouldn't be involved so much. I was there for observation. Um, but I'll go out there, and and all this time my wife is having trouble with the baby, and she needed me there, but I was there,
Yeah.
and that definitely put a mark on our relationship. Like, um, even to this day, my wife, she struggles with religion. She struggles with all that because of what I was doing. I was neglecting her, um, even if it's just for one day. At that time, my son had a heart condition, and it
Mm,
was a tough time. It was a real tough time for us.
yeah.
Praise God, he doesn't have any more heart problems, and I pray that doesn't
Thanks to God.
that yeah, thanks to God. I just pray it doesn't come back, right? But um, you know, it it marred our relationship. Um, and that's something that even now it bothers me. Um, it wasn't so much my family. My family were uh, that I grew up with. They were pretty much gone at this point. Um, and my mom and my dad, they were gone at this point. And my sister had moved away to Massachusetts. Um, but my family here, it definitely had an effect on them. And so, um, you know, me and my our marriage, we're having struggles in our marriage, and I'm still going because I have this like um,
Conviction.
conviction to go there, and to be there, right, and not to go to
Yeah.
hell, because that was definitely something that was bothering me, and I
That
was
fear
still
is
struck.
real.
Yeah, no, it is. They preach so much on the fear of going to hell, and that is the last times. And it's interesting, when I hear about people that were prior of 2012, how they were preaching like, hey, this is happening now this year. Um, I didn't get that. We were past that, right? And um, I didn't get that preaching, but it was still hellfire preaching. Like, it was still hell. I mean, almost every sermon, it was
Yeah.
all about bearing fruit, and you're gonna go to hell if you don't do this. Right? It was like almost that
Yeah.
was like every sermon. That's what I was getting. I was like, oh man, I gotta get moving. I gotta do something for the
And
kingdom.
that never changed. I mean,
Yeah,
my wife came in beginning of 2014. I came in beginning of 2015, ever since we left, because we left just I left September of 24, so a few months ago. And same thing, right? If you don't bear fruit, if you don't lead people in, and those people don't tithe and become gospel workers, then you did you even bear fruit, right? Are you even
Yeah.
alive? Are you going to heaven, right? And so your salvation is constantly in the balance, and you have no idea where you stand at any time, and that's just
Yeah.
not a fun way to live.
No, it's just that constant perpetual fear. Like, I understand that we ought to live in the fear of the Lord, right? But it this
But
was
God's
just
not a
really,
psychopath.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
He's
he's
not a
not gonna just,
psychopathic dictator. He's not.
yeah, no, he's not, and he gives chances. And if Jesus gave the example, if your brother has sinned against you, and he comes and repents to you, or forgive him, and they're like, how many times? 7 times, and he says 70 times seven. So, you know, I, there's one thing with definitely true repentance, but if we sincerely go to God and apologize, like, for something that we did, right, He will forgive us, right? The word says that, whoever confesses their sin to Him, that He is faithful to forgive us. So,
Amen.
you know, um, you know, I just was not seeing that there. And at this point, I began to read the Bible a lot more, and I was understanding a lot more at this point. And there was some cracks that I was seeing that wasn't making sense, particularly that teaching with the clouds representing flesh, right?
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't remember a lot of the teachings, but I remember that was particularly out. I went into the Hebrew, and I was just like, "Yo, this doesn't say anything about flesh, right? Like, how do this clouds represent him being in the flesh here?" Like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I remember that's coming to my memory right now. Did they have a teaching?
Yeah. Yeah, they would say, coming on the clouds or coming with the clouds means coming in the flesh, and that refers to Jesus being born, and they'd have this whole thing. And what's interesting is that wasn't even first taught by Ansang Hong. That was actually taught by Reverend Moon in 1950s. So a different Korean cult actually taught that first.
Wow, no
And
way.
that coming from the east meant Korea, and that the root of David is going to unseal the lost truth and restore the lost truth the last days. That was from Reverend Moon also in 1950s.
No way. Wow, thank you for telling me that, because I didn't make that connection. Some people doing exposés, they were talking how there was some resemblance. They didn't give any examples, but to that other cult from Reverend Moon. Um, wow, thank you for sharing that. Actually, that's actually some really good information.
Yeah, it's called The Divine Principle, and give it a read. It's a big book. It's like 1,000 pages, but it has some interesting teachings in there, and that's lot. A lot of them you'll see, especially like when it comes to like God the Mother. That's also where a lot of that comes from too. Um, the Mormons, which I grew up in, so I grew up LDS, they taught about the pre-existence, the war in heaven. They taught about God the Mother, how father and mother come together and have spirit babies and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think the WMSCOG, in my opinion, is just like, ooh, I like that. Ooh.
yeah,
Like all these things, and they just
well,
put it together.
yeah, and it's crazy how they'll catch people already coming out of, like, for me, being like that conspiracy theorist type of thing. The way
Yeah.
they were saying, "Hey, like, we have the truth." They've,
Everyone else is
this.
wrong and crazy.
Y- Yeah, yeah, and what really caught me was that truth of book with Constantine and all this stuff. Like, I was just like, yeah, this is, yeah. I just came
Yeah.
across all this information, and I'm just like, wow. Um, and on your um end of the aisle is like, with the LDS, it kind
Yeah, I
of,
just came out of that and got scooped up by the WCOG, because I left around when I was 18-ish,
yeah.
I left the Mormon faith, and I got baptized when I was 19 in the WCOG. So kind of similar to your situation. I wasn't well versed. I didn't know anything about life. I didn't know. where I was going, where I was heading. And when somebody says, "Hey, I have the truth," and they have all these intricate, because the WMSCOG, they're not dumb, right? They're not dumb at all. They're very smart. They're very crafty. I mean, when it comes to their theology, if you really know theology, you know the word. Obviously, you're like, this is not what it's saying. This is not what it makes. This does not make
Yeah.
any sense. But when you don't know the theology, you don't know like like biblical hermeneutics or anything like that, you're like, oh, this makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Their ability to take things out of context is, I mean, it's very good. And I think what's good is that they have it memorized. You know,
Hmm.
they were doing like, well, to me, what it looked like drills. Like they would
Yeah.
break out.
Scripts.
They they would break out into groups and they would just get on the boards and they would just like, hey, and I mean, and everybody had it memorized. Like, even though I asked a lot of questions and a lot of questions were not answered, a lot more were answered, right? There were,
Right.
um, and it was just quick and they just knew the scripture. And I'm just like, oh, wow. Like, so for me hearing that, and for me that I couldn't even quote any scripture really, for them to like almost quote almost a paragraph, in some cases,
Yeah.
I was enamored. I was like, hey, I want to be able to do this. Like I want
And
to do that.
and I think there's something to be said with just the confidence, right? Because when you're not really sure about the scriptures and stuff, and somebody who clearly seems to know like what they're talking about comes and gives you an answer, I mean, how are you going to be like, oh well, I don't think that's right. Well, what do you know? Nothing. It's like, yeah, that's what I thought, And so there's something to say with that confidence of how they present it and how they speak and how they just, with 110% faith, just boom, here it is. And so there's something to say for that. And I think that does something psychologically, especially if you don't know, right? And somebody's telling you something and they're showing you what seems to be the Bible and they're 100% sure in their own mind. And so you're like, okay, why would I question this? And the fact that when they do teach you and talk to you, they're like 2 or 3 steps ahead of you at all
Yes.
times. And so that also creates a very unequal power dynamic on top of the confidence that's already been displayed. And typically, when you're in a room, the person standing up is teaching on the board, and that's a sign of like authority. And then you're in a submission pose, which you're sitting down and you're kind of relaxed. You have a cup of water or coffee, and you're just in there for the ride. And so there's a bunch of different dynamics at work to where there's really not a environment for it to be like a level playing field. It's definitely like we're up here, you're down here, and you kind of get
Yes.
that vibe through all those different kind of scenarios.
Yes. 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 That's good. That's good. Yeah, man. So many things are coming to mind. Um, back to when I was watching that video, um, I I wasn't totally convinced, but I was just sitting there and they were questioning me. They were like, "What do you think about this?" I was like, "Yeah, I believe it." And I was lying. I was totally
Is
lying.
this the In Heaven play you're referring to, the mother one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's in the evening time. I don't remember if this was a Sabbath or I was just there one day. I might have had the day off and I spent the whole day there.
Mm,
It was me and all the co-pastors and Jason, and then they showed me the video. Um, and they're like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Oh, finally I knew who this mother is, and who this lady is."
mhm.
Um, and we were talking about it. One thing that stood out to me, I don't know, I guess this was around the time that Michelle was having battles with them in court at this time.
Yeah, that was around
Um,
the time.
um, and I remember the co-pastor mentioning that. He's like, whoever speaks, and around this time they told me not to go on the internet. I remember that specifically. They were like, hey, just don't go on the internet, be careful. We would suggest you don't even go on it at all. They're like, don't go around and try to look this up, and and they told me, that there are some people speaking against him, and I remember the pastor, the way he said, he was like, yeah, but we take them to court and find them. And remember the way he said it was just very malicious, and that was another thing that really stood out to me. Another red flag. And even when I was just sitting there watching that, that was a complete red flag. But right, him mentioning that, and I was just, and again, I'm questioning, like, why would you take anybody to court? Like,
For
I mean,
disagreeing with you.
yeah, yeah, and I'm just like, well, why would you do that? Like, I think that's wrong. It's just all these little things, and it just it began to come to a point where things were unraveling. I'm asking questions and not really getting answered, or they are getting answered, and I'm like, well, wait a second, the scripture says this, though. Because at this point I'm beginning to read a lot more. I'm in fear
Hmm.
of God, right? I'm in fear of going to hell. So now I'm like really studying. I'm staying up all night studying the word. And there was some things where I was like, okay, this is mother. And some things I'm like, okay, I'm reading about Jesus
Big
cursing the
tree.
tree that had no figs on it. I'm like, oh man, that's me. I don't want to go to hell. Like, I can't, gotta make sure that's not me. Um, but there were some things that I was reading and was like, well, wait a second, this is kind of contradicting what they're saying. And then I would go in and ask, and they were trying to talk me out of it. And I'm just like, man, I don't know. I kind of feel like this is saying that. Like, why?
Why are
Um,
you saying it's the opposite? Like, I thought we
yeah,
were Bible based. I thought we were, focused on the word, but you're saying
yeah.
actually it's the complete opposite. How does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, they
Yeah.
and I wasn't privy to all this information that that you and your wife had came across. Um Again, I had gotten some of I think I had received the hymn book and another green book. I forgot the name of it, but I received some green book. Somebody I was trying to buy it online and I couldn't for whatever reason, and then somebody gave me theirs. Um I mean, I ended up throwing them away at a certain point. But I forgot the name of that book. It was like some writings of Aung San Hong, some book that he wrote
It's
supposedly.
probably the green book is what we call it, and it's called the mystery of God and the spring of the water of life.
Yes, yes, yes. So they gave me one, and that was something like at that point, like um, it had to be entrusted to you for you to have at that time. I don't know how it was when you
Yeah,
guys were there. It
it's the
wasn't something
same.
that it wasn't when like, hey, we're just gonna give this book. Like
No,
they
you
they
had to be
had
like preaching, tithing. You had to be like so many services on a certain, there's a certain criteria. It's not just like a hey, you just got baptized yesterday. Well, here, take this. No, it's not.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not
Because
how it works.
I would see people with it, and I'm like, well, what's that? And they would let me look at it very briefly, and I was like, well, man, how can I get one of these books? And they were like, oh, later on you'll learn first, and then you'll get this. And I'm like, okay. Um, and then
Always
I was trying to,
later.
yeah, then I was trying to buy it, and I couldn't buy it, and then they finally just, somebody gave me theirs, and I was like, "Oh, thanks, awesome." But I never, be honest with you, I never really read it. I never read it. I just got it, and I was like, "All right, cool. I got this book. I'll read it sometime." And I never read it.
Well, they took three
Um,
chapters out of it anyway from his original, so
well, yeah, that's some of this information I was not privy to. So,
it
you
wasn't
know,
available, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, around that time, I think Michelle was in court, and no information was. I think she might have posted some information which caused them to sue her.
Yeah,
Um, and
but
but I
her website was like at the beginning stages. It wasn't like in 2014, 2015, because that's when me and my wife almost left too, because we heard some rumors and stuff. We looked into it, and the only thing we found was her website, and there wasn't really anything on there that was crazy, and so around your time, I mean, there really was nothing about this place at all.
got it. Yeah, I had what started unraveling for me, it was me just simply reading the scripture. And I began to distance myself because I some of the answers I was just like, man, no, that's wrong, man. Like, no.
Yeah.
um and um and then not only that, my son is dealing with a heart condition. um, and I wasn't there as frequent as I used to be. So Jason's still, I was still at work all the time, every day that I was scheduled, and Jason was still like, "Yo, man, you got to come back," he's just putting fear in me, instilling a lot of fear in me. He's like, "Yo, man, come on, man, you gotta show up, you gotta get here," and at that time, I was already cutting the Sabbath short. I would go for morning service, maybe stay for lunch, and then go evangelize, and then leave.
Mm.
Um, and I wasn't coming that often during the week like I used to. And and again, I guess with that empty space that I had, I was just studying and praying on my own. And then
Yeah.
that's when I began to see some things and some little holes here and there. And that's when I began to question, and I began to see the frustration come from them when I would ask the questions. And with some people like Jason, he was very, very soft spoken. Um, the one brother that he was one of the co-pastor's little brother, he was always frustrated when I would ask him questions. He was always frustrated. And he's like, "Yo, why are you questioning this?" He was, he would, and then he began questioning me. He's like, "Yo, I think your faith is dwindling, man." Like he would put me down and
You're the
shame me.
problem. You're the
Yeah.
problem. It doesn't make sense. You're the problem. We aren't connecting the dots. You're the problem. This doesn't match scripture. It's all just, it's like, wow, such a fragile
Yes.
truth.
Yeah, no, you hit that on the nail. Jason was really soft with me, but he was always warning me. Um, and I forget the guy's name. Maybe it's Eduardo. I forgot his name, but the co-pastor's younger brother, he was pushing to be a pastor. He was like really working hard on becoming a pastor. Um, he was really pushing for that. And yeah, he will always down me, always put me down, really pressing me. And, me being in that place where I don't want to disappoint anybody. I don't want to disappoint God, I don't want
Hmm.
to disappoint, mother, and it's crazy from time to time they would show these videos of how hard mother works and how hard she's doing this. And then I would see these videos where, when uh, I don't know how so often, a lot of the churches would go visit her,
Yeah.
and how they would just be breaking down crying before her. And I was just like, man, and that also, that seeing that made me, I wanted to go desperately. I was like, man, I would love to go meet her. Like
Right.
I want that embrace from her. I want to be hugged. But that became a bit of an infatuation with me, of me going to Korea. It was something I
Yeah.
was like, um I didn't, at that point, I didn't understand that you had to be selected to go there.
Yeah.
Um, I was just like, you know what? Just gonna buy a ticket and go there. That was my thought process. I was like, you know what? And she won't reject me. I can just go there. I had that, and I'm glad I had that in my mind, because later on something did happen which caused me to like just totally separate myself from the church. Um, so I'm still going through the motions. I'm in fear. I'm studying very hard. I'm also trying to preach to people too. I'm preaching people at my job. I'm just preaching to random people.
Hmm.
I didn't have really much success, but I was sharing about Mother God, right? Like I was sharing
Yeah.
these things with other people.
You were doing what you thought was best.
Yes, yes. And then even me myself, I'm trying to live holy. I'm trying to change my life. I'm trying to live right. I'm tithing. I'm making sure I'm tithing. Um, as much as possible. I was bringing food at times. I would
Hmm.
ask them like, "Hey guys, what needs do you have?" I know because they would cook lunch, right? So,
Right.
I would bring food at times. I was bringing food. Um, and it's crazy. They're like, "Oh, he brought this," and God bless you. And they
We
were
love
like,
you. We love you.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it was encouraging me to do more, right? So getting I can't even say the word. Getting that praise and accolades, made me feel like I was doing something right. I was
Yeah.
being part of something, and I feel bad because I was being, manipulated, right? I
Yeah.
didn't catch it then. So, um, after my son is born, we're getting closer to December of 2004. November, December is really big business for me at my store. So I'm really occupied. So there was a couple Sabbaths I was missing, and I was at home. And again, I'm just getting the phone calls. They're like, "Hey, we're
Getting
worried
blown up.
about you." Yeah, they're like, "Hey, we're worried about you, and you're not here. Like, what? You should be here, and don't stop coming." And I'm getting a lot of that. Jason is still coming and visiting. He's like, "Hey, man, you gotta." Like you can't neglect this, man. Like you have to be here, man. You have to. And they were really pressing me. Um, and finally, I came back one Sabbath, and they put up this video. And at this point, I want to say this. At this point, they already had purchased the new building, and they were remodeling it. I wasn't there for any of the remodeling. They already had purchased it, and they started remodeling, and then they were talk about it. They were talking about like all these spiritual learnings or understandings they were getting from building the building, right? We're like just
Hmm.
gutting it and rebuilding it. And I'm like, man, I'm missing out on all this, right? And it's a busy season for me. I have to be at work. There's just a lot of business planning. I got to hire a bunch of people. Like it was just like it was really hectic.
Yeah.
And I um I get back one Sabbath, and they put this video on, and this was like one of the straws that broke the camel's back for me. But they put this video on. I'm already a little disillusioned. I'm already like, hey man, there's so many holes here. I'm busy at work. You're like really pressuring me, and then I have the situation at home too, and I'm just like,
It's too much.
yeah, I'm at my kind of at my wits end, and they put this video on, and I'm sitting next to the co-pastor's brother, right? And it shows this video is a message from mother, right? There was a banner behind her, right? And it said 2013, right? We're almost over in 2014. And they were like, hey, this is a new message from mother. We have to listen. She doesn't put a lot of these out. So please, guys, just listen to what she has to say, right? Um, and again, they have she's speaking in Korean, right? But
Yeah. The translation,
they have the
the
translation. So they're like,
subtitles. Yeah.
yeah, so they're like, be quiet. And then they were just emphasizing this was a new message, right? And that they don't get much messages from her, right? And that it was new. And I'm looking at the banner, and I'm like, and I go to the co-pastor's brother. I'm like, hey man, this is a new message. And he's like, yeah, be quiet, listen. And I'm just like, I'm looking at the banner. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm trying to reconcile this like in my mind. Like I'm not even reading any I'm not reading them. I'm not listening or reading. I'm just like stuck on the fact that there's a banner. Like it's almost 2015. It's almost 2015, and I'm stuck on this banner. I'm like, yo, how is this a new message? So I asked him again, right? And he said, yo, he was just like, hey, you need to be quiet. You need to listen to this. This is important. And I remember at that moment I turned back and I looked around and I saw everybody's faces, and I never forget, like everybody's mouths were open and just looking, and I was just like I was looking at them as they were brain dead, as they were brainwashed. And I turned back around. I was like, nah. I was like, I'm done with
Something's
this. I was
off. Something's off.
Yeah, I was like, I'm done with this. This is not right. Like, you're gonna lie to me in my face. Like, this is a new message, and then there's like this a year previously banner on there. Like, I was just like, no. I was like, something's not right. I know a lot of people left. I mean, they came across the truth, right? They came across all the lies. But for me, at that moment, I was like, no, this is not right. I was like, this is not a new message. Why are you lying to everybody? And why is everybody just believing this? I'm looking at everybody, they're like, oh, wow. And then afterwards, everybody's like, wow, that was incredible. And I'm just sitting there like, man, this is not right. This is not right. And, shortly after that, I left. I went a few more times, but and Jason was coming a lot to, he's like, yo, man, come back. And, I was just giving him lame excuses. Like, I was just like, oh, I can't because of this and that. And, one time he did come, at this point I went a few times after, but then after that, I just stopped going. And then he came one day, came to my job. I let him back in my office. We started to talk, and you know, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna test this. I was like, hey, brother, I think I was looking at tickets. I might buy a ticket tomorrow to go to Korea. I want to see mother. Like I wanna know this is real. And that morning I was reading how Jesus was washing the feet of the disciples, right? Um, and that was just, it was just devotional I was reading. I was just reading it and how he was and he said here, I gave this as an example for you, for how you should treat one another, to love one another, right? Um, so, that day when he came and he's like, I said, hey man, I think I'm gonna purchase the tickets. I'm gonna go see her. He's like, hey brother, you can't just do that. He's like, you have to be, you can't just go there. He's like, you can't just go there. I was just like, but why? I was like, if she's my mother, why should, because I remember those videos says that her heart was breaking for us and that she loves us so much and she's praying for us all the time.
She
But then
misses
I'm
us.
thinking,
She cries for us.
yeah, I, and I was just like, if I go there, she would embrace me. I would gather, like she would welcome me, right? And he
Yeah.
was just like, look, he was like, that's not how it works, brother. And I was like, well, I'm buying the ticket today, right? And he was like, look, all right, do it. He was like, but she's not gonna. It's a gated community. He was like, you're not gonna be able to get in. She'll wave at you, but you're not gonna be able to go in and see her. And I remember when he said that, I was just like, "Mm." And me thinking about how Jesus was washing the feet of the disciples. Even in Revelation says that he's gonna wipe every tear from us.
Hmm.
But she cannot come, if everybody. Jesus was approachable. Even the Gentiles was approaching Jesus, right? He turned no one away, right?
Hmm.
But she's gonna turn me away. And that was the last straw for me. When he said that, I was like, nah, this woman is not my God. I was like,
And
this
she's
woman
not
is
my
not my God.
mom. She's not
Yeah,
my mother. Even
yeah,
at face value, if that's your child, right? Like, and you haven't seen them their whole life, who would be like, no, actually, I have to hand select you, and you have to wear a name tag, and then you have to single file in a very strict order and very, everything has to be timed for you to come and approach. It's like, no, like if you haven't seen your mom for a long time and, and she really is your mom and really misses you and cares about you, then I mean, it should just be like, hey, let's make this happen. I don't care. You give me the place, the time. I don't care. Let's get together. So it's so robotic and so, and when you're
wow,
saying about the people, just like what they're just watching her, you know, being out now, I'm like, oh, how can they do that? How can they think like that? But that was me for 10 years. Just anything that lady said was, amen. Like, I will do it. I will die for mother. I will do anything for mother. I will die for father. All these kind of things. And now thinking back on it, it's just like, that's not me. I mean, of course,
yeah,
I love God and I want to serve God. I want to, and part of my way of serving God is helping people now because I
yes,
feel like I have a unique thing going on where I can actually help people and, you know, let them see through the word that this is full of holes. This is full of just deceit and manipulation. And, of course, giving to a church, right? Like when you're talking about giving to a church or giving tithe or offering or, being happy and joyful in church. Yes, that is good, right? The intention is good. But when the underlying premise is about manipulation, control, money, and greed and power, that's not good, right?
yeah,
So the same action, right? You can bring things to a church, right? And they'll actually genuinely thank you, and it's for the correct God, and it's for the correct, people of God. It's for the correct mindset, and the people appreciate it as such. It's when you overdo it, you fake it, right? That's the thing, is when it's faked, right?
Yeah.
They don't really care about you. They just know they have to smile and say, "Hey, thank you for bringing this, because if you don't, I'm worried that I'm going to kill your soul, and I don't want that." It's all about me at the end of the day. It's
Hmm.
all about that. It's they try to make it, "Well, we serve everybody, we love everybody, etc." It's like, no, you're just afraid for yourself. You're
Yeah.
afraid that if I say something, or I look a certain way, or I do something, that person's going to be destroyed, or their soul's going to be lost. They're going to disown father, mother. It- Most of the time, you're thinking about yourself, right? Instead of just bringing the food, right? Just being like, "Oh, thanks for the food, man. Cool," and
Yeah.
just being genuine. It's like, "Oh, we love you, everybody. We love you. Stand up. Like, let's put them on a chair." It's like, there's a balance, right? And it's all good, except when it's fake. There's a balance for everything. When you're faking it for the purpose of, you're not, you don't really care about the person, you don't really care that they actually did that, then there's no reason for it, right? And that's what you kind of see in these kind of groups, is they overdo these things. They overcompensate because they don't know how to be human anymore. They
Yeah.
don't know what actual love is, what actual appreciation is, what actual love is, and joy and peace. Because if they did, they couldn't stand being there for 1 second, right? And that's the breakdown process. They break you down and they build you up and they change the definition of words. And that's
Yeah.
part of it. Love is, "Oh, if I don't smile, that my mother is going to send me to hell." Right? That is their love. That is that unconditional love of mother, right?
Hmm.
Or, you know, um, love is preaching the Passover and getting people to come into the church and tithe and offer and become zombies like we are, right? That is love to them. That is sharing love with neighbors, right? Joy, like, aren't we so happy we're in the gospel work when we're broke, tired, exhausted, hungry, depressed? Like, it's like they change the meaning of words. And so what happens is, over time, you don't remember what actual peace is, because you faked it so much. "Oh, I'm so at peace. Anything I do can send me to hell, but I'm so at peace. I'm so joyful." Right? Anything I do wrong will send me to hell. "Oh, but I'm so joyful. I'm so peaceful." It's like, so they lie to themselves so much.
Yeah.
They gaslight themselves so much that they don't even know how to act human. They
Yeah.
forget how to have genuine emotion, genuine care, genuine love, genuine joy, genuine peace. And that's why people say, "Hey, you're really weird now," because they don't know how to be human anymore. They forgot
Yeah.
how to be human, you know? Um, and that's just something that, just when you said that, it just brings back, like, that, like, who was that? Like,
Yeah.
meme. Like, who was that? But it wasn't me. And so I think anyone listening and watching this, they can kind of understand that feeling, is you get broken down and you get built up. They change the definition of words, right? They change the definition of everything you've thought you knew, get rid of it, right? Now just continue feeding what we're telling you. And and so at that point, that's when you can't distinguish what actual emotions are, what's right and wrong, what's ethical and not ethical, what's deception and what's not deception. And that's what makes it hard for families to help these people, because these people have forgotten what actual family is, what love is, what peace is, what right and wrong are. And it's been replaced with what the cult wants you to think and what the cult wants you to feel. And it's impossible for the family to break through on that, because everything has been broken down, everything's been rebuilt, and so that's something that is very difficult to get out of. But sorry, I'm talking too long. So that was your last straw, was Jason came in, and basically that Korea deal, where he basically said, "No, you can't go unless you're invited, or unless mother chooses you." And you're just like, "That's not God. That's not what God would do."
Yeah. Yeah. That was my last straw. Once he said that, I was like, I'm not going back anymore. I'm not going back anymore. And after that, I was in deep fear. Like, if I was second guessing my choice. Um, and every time I studied, like, you know, everything that they had brainwashed me with, it was still there. And every time I read the scripture, I would begin to read it in the context that they gave it to me, right? And I'm like, and I was reading and reading, trying to, I was already confused reading the Bible. Now I was even more confused, because how they take things out of context, and just like what you said, they redefine everything. They redefine everything. So, there were times, pockets where I was seeing some holes in the doctrine, but then me leaving, now I'm in fear, and I'm just like, I'm questioning. I'm like, man, was I wrong for leaving? Because man, I'm seeing this what they were teaching me right here, and I struggled. I was struggling. I was praying a lot. A lot of crying. I was still praying to Mother, man. I was still praying. I'm like, Mother, if I'm sorry. Like, I don't. Like, I'm really trying to. Like, if you're there, please talk to me. Like, I was crying out to her. Like, as if she was still my God. And I was struggling very hard. But I was still determined to know the truth, and I continued to study. I continued to study. I started from the front of the book again. I went through all the Gospels, all the epistles, Revelation, and I just every day I studied. Then I started going through Genesis and then forward. Um, and still just in the fear, every so often, being they were from my area, I would see them, doing evangelism in the Walmart. um and I would talk to them. Some of them I was like, hey, how you doing? And then we would talk. And yeah, it was actually Jason's wife. She was evangelizing, and she was like, yeah, you can, at this, let me just back up. At this point, I already started to see about brainwashing, because, as I was going through this, I was like, was I brainwashed? And I began to do a whole bunch of research into brainwashing and what that looks like. And I was just like, man, I was brainwashed. Like, I was brainwashed. And, um, you know, I saw that, right? And then sometime after I'm in the Walmart, and his wife is there. She's with some other sisters, and I start talking to her, and she's like, you can always come back and do the teachings over again. And I was just like, really? You want me to go back and do the teachings over again, right? And I'm thinking, I'm going back to how many times they just isolated me, can't take any notes. I get a question wrong, I get pulled into the room. They're like, hey, we got to do this teaching over again. And, I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that
That sounds
anymore.
miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was, when she said that, I was actually reliving it in my mind. I was like, man, no, I don't think because part of me, I missed that church was every day. I missed, you know, um, gathering with other believers, right? I had, at this point, I didn't go to another church. I was very scared to be honest with you, because I felt like I was lied to, but at the same time, I was struggling with those lies. Um, I was struggling that maybe I made a wrong decision, and that maybe I need to come back. I was struggling with all this, man. Like, I was like, man, it was coming on me real hard, because I there was some comfort to be there with people that just wanted to serve God, right?
Right.
They love God, and they wanted to serve God. And that's where I was. Like, I wanted to know who God was. I wanted to serve him. I wanted to love other
You wanted to
people. And
have that again.
yeah, I was, part of being there is that they were interested in what I was interested in, right? Just being back home around coworkers again. Um, I was always preaching. I was always talking about the word. I was always talking about some revelation I received, and they're like, "Man, you crazy, man." They're like, You're going way too far with this uh Jesus stuff. Like, you know, um, and it was hard. It was really hard, but I still I still studied. I was home a lot more often. You know, I had switched jobs, and that really didn't work out. So for a little bit of time after I switched jobs, I was home majority of the time. My wife went back to work, and then I was working part time, and she was working full time. Before it was opposite, and um, at that time it was good. All that stuff I was indoctrinated in. At this point, I saw all counter um the counter apologetics to what was being said. I saw it all. I was just like, man, like this was what was happening, right? Because
Yeah.
and how and Michelle, it's crazy because um one of my best friends were dating her at the time, so I knew who she was. I wasn't hanging out with them, but I saw, in school, I saw he was if I saw him, she was with him. So I saw her like almost every day at school, right? Or I'll
Interesting.
call yeah, well, I'll call him, and they they broke up, and then she, you know, married
Did
somebody
her
else.
thing.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think her husband at the time when she was going, was her husband from that time that her and my friend split up. I believe. I could be wrong. So Michelle, forgive me.
Yeah.
Um, and I did reach out to her. She didn't remember me, but I did reach out to her. I'm like, hey, I didn't. Once I saw the news, like, I was just like, get out of here. That's Michelle. Like, get. I couldn't believe it. And then when she had her interview on Great Light Studios, I think she was when they were live streaming it. I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, do you remember me? I ended up in that cult too, and but she didn't remember me. But um, yeah, so uh, you know, even though I did go through a little suffering with all this, I am glad it happened. I fellowship with a lot of brothers and sisters, and sometimes they'll get involved with some type of new movement or church, and sometimes they'll share things, and I'm just like, be careful,
Yeah.
be careful, because this what you're going through right now sounds like some tactics that were being used towards me to deceive. I was like, just be careful.
Yeah. And maybe what
And
we can
then
do too um is so maybe we could do like a part two of
yeah,
this, and then we can
yes,
kind of, we can kind of start at you coming out a little bit, giving some, some context to the viewers, and then we can do a part two where it's like, okay, now that you're out, like what has been your process? Because obviously it's been like 10 years, right?
yes,
And so I'm sure a lot has happened during that time to where, you probably had ups and downs and you probably experienced a lot more things. And maybe we can
yeah,
talk about that and work through that. Because I think that deserves a video in and of itself, just because that process is not really what's talked about a lot. But of
yes,
course, the backstory of how you get to there is also important. But I think that deserves, like where you're at now and your journey to where you're at now, I think deserves a whole nother video dedicated to that alone.
yeah,
So let's do that. Let's plan a part two. Um,
yes,
and that way we can not rush anything, because obviously we're at about an hour and 45 minutes at this point. So let's do that. Let's regroup. Maybe we can do like next week or in a couple of weeks, depending on your schedule. I'm open. Saturdays are usually the best for me, so I'm open
yes,
to
yeah.
Saturdays.
Same here. Same here.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like, um, coming out to it, I started working Saturdays again, and I started working every weekend again, and um, I don't know. That's changed. Now I try to have off every Saturday again, and
Yeah.
not in their type of context, but you know, um, my background. I didn't share my background, but my father's side is Jewish, and my mother's side is Puerto Rican. So, I kind of got acclimated to some of the Jewish practices, just to get in touch with my Jewish roots a little bit. And there's been a blessing in that, but
Yeah.
you know,
And
it's it's not like how they were putting it, man. Like, I just take off, I study, and that's basically it. That's basically it. And I just spend time with my family, and
that's
it's been
exactly
like
what
a
I do.
yeah, it's just been a blessing, man. Like I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I think this is how it's supposed to be. Before is just like, hey, if your rest of your family is not believers, they're all going to hell. Be
So why
here. You know what I
bother?
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, be here. And now I realize, like, hey, if the husband is supposed to be the priest of his household, right?
Yeah.
He's supposed to be here to teach and help grow his family into a godly manner. So now it's just like my main focus is my family. Like after going through all this, I realized the mistakes. Um, realized a lot of the mistakes I did is just neglecting my family because in their eyes they're going to hell because their eyes see that if you don't believe in Aung San Hong and Mother God, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
And that's how I started to look at it too. And me alone unknowingly they were dividing me from my wife, and and I had the hopes like, hey, my wife will eventually come, if she would just see me do all these good works, and that wasn't the case. Instead, it just created a lot of friction between us, man. So now I just make it a point to spend time with my family and
Yeah.
be with them a lot, 100% of the time. And if I'm going somewhere, I they have to come with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's a bit of my story. Um, it's not as dramatic as some that have heard that really hurt me, that they were hurt dramatically. And I mean, even you
Yeah.
guys, I know you guys were hurt too. And that one
Yeah.
girl, I forgot her name, but I know she was working very closely with some of the heads out.
Corey.
Corey, yeah, man, like I was just like,
Yeah. Her
wow,
story
man.
is really sad. And
Uh,
I think every story, regardless of who or what or why, every story deserves to be told because every story is unique and every story can help somebody.
yeah,
And so I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And, it's not easy. And then especially if it's been a long time, probably the last thing you want to think about is your time in there. And so it's probably really painful to go back and kind of open the wound, if you will. But I think this will basically conclude part one. Like I said, in part two, we'll talk to Jason. And we'll kind of see what happened after he left, his process, and what his ups and downs were, and where he's at now. Because obviously you're still a Christian, you still believe in Jesus, still believe in the Bible. So I think it'd be very interesting to see that process of how you got to that conclusion, and so we can kind of dissect that in our part two. When that's going to be, we'll decide. We'll play it by ear and see. But
yeah.
I want to give you a couple minutes, just if there's anything that you want to say to maybe members who are in this organization, a piece of advice or anything. What would you tell members who are watching this right now?
Um, man, there's just so much I want to say right now. Um, the one thing I would say, what I see with everybody, they're very immature, they're very in the infancy of their walk with the Lord. Um, some were having some trials and tribulations, deaths and family. They were in a very vulnerable place, and I believe I was there too. Um, you have to build your own relationship with God. You have to work with that. I was trying to put that on other people, you know. Um, I, as I mentioned before, I wanted somebody else to teach me what the Lord was willing to teach teach me himself, right? And um, I wasn't disciplined in that, and I wanted somebody else to do it for me. So, it wasn't until I started studying the Bible for myself, uninhibited from somebody telling me, is when the Lord started opening my eyes. And the truth is all there in the book. And what I want to say is that you got have to get determined to get alone with the Lord. It says when we go in secret and seek Him, He will reward us openly. Um, and that would be my suggestion: is to find the truth out for yourself. There's so much misinformation out there, and it'll water down the truth, and you will get deceived, and you will start doing things and walking out of the purpose that God has for you. And I learned that after coming out, as I mentioned to you, Adam, like, it caused me to dig deeper
Yeah.
rather than get discouraged, which I see a lot of, many do. They get discouraged. They look at all the denominations out there. They're like, well, which one is right? You know, if you see God yourself, and if you read His word for yourself and ask Him, hey, what does this mean? He would eventually tell you. He will tell you. It might not be that day, it might not be that instant, but if you persevere in seeking the truth, He will give it to you. The Bible also says, Jesus said, whoever not seeks, he will find, or whoever knocks, it will be open to him.
Amen.
So, yeah, I just want to encourage you guys to keep seeking the truth. It is there. There's only one truth. It is Jesus Christ. If we seek Him with all our heart, and according to Jeremiah, if we seek Him with all our hearts, there He will be found. There He will be found. It's a matter of the heart, and if your heart's desire is for Him, His heart's desire would be to reveal Himself to you, and
Amen.
that would be my encouragement and my recommendation to do.
Well, I don't think I could have said it better myself. So we'll just leave it at that. Again, thank you, Jason, for coming on here. And everyone watching, please stay tuned for part two, because I think part two is going to be um, really crucial in understanding how Jason went from, New Age to WMSCOG to obviously being a Christian who is, really vigorous for the Lord, vigorous for the Bible, vigorous for God's truth. So if that's something you want to experience with us, please stay tuned for part two. Other than
Amen.
that, thank you all for joining, and thank you, Jason, again.
Amen. Thank you, Adam.